most of us, the terrifying realization happens in the most ordinary way possible. You're making a simple sandwich. You pull out a loaf of bread that's been sitting in the pantry way past its expiration date. But when you look closely, it's completely flawless. No mold, no staleness, no strange smell. It looks perfectly soft and untouched. At first, it just feels slightly odd. But then, you start noticing it everywhere.
For most people, the moment this question appears is surprisingly ordinary. It might happen in the kitchen while preparing a simple meal. Someone opens a loaf of bread that has been sitting in the pantry longer than expected. The expiration date has already passed, yet the slices still look soft and untouched. No mold, no strange smell, nothing that suggests the bread has started to age. At first, it just feels slightly odd. But then similar moments start appearing everywhere. Someone cuts into a chicken breast and notices thick white lines running through the meat. Another person squeezes a bag of sandwich bread that refuses to go stale. Others say fruits sometimes look perfectly polished but taste strangely bland. Individually, these moments do not prove anything is wrong. Food can vary for many reasons. Storage conditions, processing methods, and packaging all influence how it behaves. What makes people uneasy is how often these observations seem to repeat. Over the past few years, clips showing these kinds of food oddities have spread rapidly online. Some claim the food supply has quietly changed. Others argue modern agriculture has pushed efficiency so far that food itself no longer behaves the way people remember. The truth is more complicated, but the growing number of these observations raises an important question about how the American food system actually works today. For many people, the first sign that something might be different about food did not come from a news report or a scientific article. It came from a small moment at home. Someone cooking dinner cuts into a chicken breast and notices thin white lines running across the meat. The texture feels slightly firmer than expected. It is not obviously spoiled or unsafe, just different enough to make them pause. A quick search online reveals something surprising. Thousands of other people have posted videos asking the exact same question. Soon the examples begin to multiply. One person squeezes a loaf of sandwich bread that has been sitting in the pantry for far longer than they remember bread lasting in the past. Another video shows potato chips bending instead of snapping. Some people say certain fruits look perfectly smooth and polished, but seem to have less flavor than they remember. Individually, these observations might not mean much. Food has always varied depending on how it is stored, processed, or prepared. But when similar experiences appear across thousands of households, people naturally begin comparing notes. This is where social media changes the conversation. In the past, a strange food experience would remain a private curiosity. Today it becomes a short video, and that video quickly reaches millions of viewers. Suddenly, people realize they are not the only ones noticing these small differences. At that point, the explanations start appearing as well. Some claim modern food has become completely artificial. Others argue the entire food supply has quietly changed without consumers realizing it. Those conclusions travel quickly because they offer a simple explanation for something that feels unsettling. But the real story is usually more complicated than a viral caption suggests. Many of the strange behaviors people notice in food today have explanations rooted in how modern agriculture and food manufacturing operate. The scale of production, the speed of distribution, and the technologies used to preserve products all influence how food looks, feels, and lasts. And once you begin looking at how large the modern food system has become, many of these observations start to make more sense. To understand why these small changes in food keep appearing, it helps to step back and look at something most people rarely see. The modern food system operates at a scale that would have been almost impossible a few generations ago. The easiest place to notice that scale is inside a large supermarket. Walk through the aisles early in the morning, and you may see workers moving pallets from the back of the store. Boxes of packaged food are stacked high on rolling carts. Refrigerated trucks arrive with new deliveries before the previous shipment has even finished selling. By the end of the day, a large portion of that inventory will already be gone. This constant movement of food has become so normal that people rarely stop to think about it. Grocery stores are expected to stay full. Fresh products are expected to appear every day. Even foods that grow only in certain seasons are available year-round. Behind that convenience sits an enormous supply chain. Farms produce crops and livestock at massive volumes. Those products move through processing facilities, packaging plants, refrigerated warehouses, and transportation networks before they ever reach a grocery shelf. A single food item may travel hundreds or even thousands of miles before someone places it in their shopping cart. For food producers, this creates a very specific challenge. Products must survive the journey. They must remain stable while being transported long distances. They must sit in distribution centers and retail storage without spoiling too quickly. They must still look appealing when customers finally see them in a store. Because of that, modern food manufacturing focuses heavily on durability. Ingredients are formulated to remain stable. Packaging is designed to control moisture and exposure to air. Processing methods are optimized to keep food consistent across enormous production batches. None of these practices automatically make food unsafe. In many cases, they are what allow grocery stores to remain stocked and prices to stay relatively affordable. But these same systems can also change how food behaves. Textures may feel slightly different. Shelf life may become longer than people expect. Appearance may become more uniform than what older generations remember. And in some foods, those changes become noticeable enough that people begin asking questions. Chicken was one of the first foods where that happened. Among the many foods people began discussing online, chicken appeared surprisingly often. The moment usually starts in the kitchen while preparing a meal. Someone slices into a chicken breast and notices something unusual running through the meat. Thin white streaks appear across the muscle, almost like faint lines woven through the surface. The chicken cooks normally and smells fine, yet the texture feels slightly different from what they remember. A short video appears online showing the discovery. The person holds the chicken closer to the camera and asks if anyone else has seen this before. Within hours, the comments fill with similar experiences. People share photos from their own kitchens. Others say they have noticed chicken that feels firmer or pulls apart in long strands instead of separating easily. At first glance, it is easy to assume something artificial must be happening. Some posts claim grocery store chicken is no longer natural. Others suggest it might be laboratory-grown meat entering the market without consumers realizing it. These ideas spread quickly because they offer a dramatic explanation for something people do not recognize. But the phenomenon has been studied for years by poultry researchers. The white lines that people notice are known as white striping, and another related condition is often called woody breast. Both involve changes in the muscle tissue of commercial broiler chickens. Scientists believe several factors may contribute, but one of the most discussed is the rapid growth rate of modern poultry breeds. Over time, breeding programs have focused heavily on chickens that grow quickly and produce large amounts of breast meat. This has made chicken one of the most affordable sources of protein in the United States. However, when birds reach market weight very quickly, their muscle fibers can develop differently from slower-growing breeds in the past. Those structural changes sometimes appear as the white streaks or firmer textures people notice. Importantly, this does not mean supermarket chicken is lab-grown or synthetic. Instead, it shows how optimizing agriculture for efficiency can subtly change the physical characteristics of food. Once people begin noticing those differences in something as common as chicken, they often start paying closer attention to other foods as well. One product that repeatedly raises similar questions is bread. If chicken made some people pause, bread created a different kind of reaction. The moment is usually simple. Someone reaches into the pantry and finds a bag of sandwich bread that has been sitting there longer than expected. The printed date on the packaging may already have passed, yet the slices still look soft and flexible. There is no visible mold, no unusual smell, and the bread bends easily in the hand. For anyone used to homemade bread or bakery loaves, this can feel strange. Traditionally baked bread often begins to dry out or develop mold within a few days, if left at room temperature. When packaged bread appears unchanged after a much longer period, many people immediately wonder what allows it to last so long. Videos showing this discovery have spread widely online. Someone squeezes the loaf and asks how something made from flour and water could stay soft for weeks. In the comments, the explanations quickly become dramatic. Some claim bread that refuses to mold must be artificial. Others argue that modern packaged foods are no longer natural products. The real explanation usually comes down to how commercial baking works. Bread produced at an industrial scale must travel through a distribution network before reaching consumers. A loaf may leave a factory, move through warehouses, travel by truck to retail stores, and sit on shelves for several days before anyone buys it. Without some form of protection, mold could appear long before the product reaches the customer. To prevent that, commercial bakeries often use ingredients that slow microbial growth. One commonly used compound is calcium propionate. It helps inhibit the development of mold in baked goods and allows bread to remain fresh longer than traditional recipes would allow. Packaging also plays a major role. Plastic wrapping reduces exposure to air and helps maintain moisture levels inside the loaf. Temperature control during transportation and storage can further extend how long the bread remains stable. When preservatives, packaging, and modern logistics work together, bread can last far longer than people expect. For consumers who remember bread behaving differently years ago, that change can feel unsettling. And once people begin thinking about preservatives in food, the conversation often shifts toward another concern that appears frequently online: agricultural chemicals. As conversations about preservatives and food processing spread online, another concern often enters the discussion. This time, the focus shifts away from factories and toward the farms where food begins. Many people start asking a different question. If crops are grown on such a large scale, what chemicals are used to protect them? One name appears repeatedly in these debates: glyphosate. Short videos and posts across social media claim that traces of this herbicide can be found in foods such as oats, cereals, and bread. When people hear that a chemical used to kill weeds might also appear in food products, the reaction is usually immediate. The idea alone is enough to create alarm, especially when viral posts frame it as evidence that something has gone seriously wrong with modern agriculture. The reality is more complex. Glyphosate is one of the most widely used herbicides in the world. Farmers use it to control weeds that compete with crops for water, sunlight, and nutrients. Because it is applied across large agricultural areas, extremely small residues can sometimes remain on harvested crops. This possibility is not ignored by regulators. In the United States, the Environmental Protection Agency establishes limits known as tolerance levels. These limits determine how much residue can legally remain on food while still being considered safe, based on toxicological research. Monitoring programs regularly test foods to ensure those limits are respected. The U.S. Department of Agriculture operates the Pesticide Data Program, which examines thousands of food samples every year. According to USDA reports, the vast majority of tested products contain residue levels that fall well below established safety thresholds. Despite these safeguards, the presence of any chemical residue in food still makes many consumers uncomfortable. Scientific risk assessments usually focus on dosage and exposure levels, while public concern often centers on the idea that the substance appears in food at all. This difference in perspective fuels ongoing debate. Some people trust the regulatory system to manage these risks. Others believe the widespread use of agricultural chemicals reflects a deeper problem within modern farming. And when people begin comparing these practices across different countries, the discussion becomes even more complicated. As people dig deeper into pesticides and food additives, another comparison often appears in online discussions. Many consumers start asking why certain ingredients are allowed in one country but restricted in another. The comparison most frequently mentioned involves the United States and the European Union. At first glance, these differences can seem alarming. Viral posts often claim that a chemical used in American foods has already been banned elsewhere. When information like that spreads quickly online, it can create the impression that one region protects consumers more carefully than another. In reality, the situation is more complicated. Food regulations are shaped by different legal systems and different approaches to risk. In the United States, agencies such as the Food and Drug Administration and the Environmental Protection Agency evaluate scientific evidence and determine what levels of exposure are considered safe. If available research shows a substance can be used safely below certain thresholds, regulators may allow it under controlled limits. European regulators sometimes approach the issue differently. They may apply what is known as the precautionary principle, which allows authorities to restrict or remove an ingredient when scientific uncertainty remains about possible long-term effects. Because of these different approaches, certain additives or chemicals may remain approved in one region while being limited in another. Regulations in both systems also change over time as new research appears. For consumers watching these debates unfold, the shifting rules can feel confusing. When an ingredient that was once approved later becomes restricted, people naturally begin wondering whether other changes could follow. That uncertainty often fuels the broader conversation about how modern food systems operate. As these conversations about food continue to spread, something interesting has started to change. The discussion is no longer focused only on one ingredient, one pesticide, or one unusual viral video. Instead, more people are beginning to question how the entire food system works. This shift is visible in everyday behavior. Farmers markets in many cities have grown steadily in popularity. Community-supported agriculture programs have expanded. Some households have even started experimenting with growing small amounts of food at home, whether that means herbs on a balcony or vegetables in a backyard garden. These choices are not always driven by fear. In many cases, they are driven by curiosity and a desire for transparency. When food comes directly from a local farm or a nearby producer, the process behind it feels easier to understand. People can see where it was grown, ask questions about how it was produced, and feel more connected to the source. Large-scale food systems operate very differently. Modern agriculture and food manufacturing rely on long supply chains that stretch across regions and sometimes across continents. Crops are grown in one place, processed somewhere else, packaged in large facilities, and then transported long distances before they ever reach a store shelf. By the time most foods arrive at the grocery store, the production process behind them is largely invisible to the consumer. That distance can make the system feel difficult to understand even when safety regulations are in place. For many people, the concern is not necessarily that food is unsafe. The concern is that the system producing it feels too complex and too far removed from everyday life. At the same time, the modern food system has achieved something remarkable. It provides enormous quantities of food and distributes them across a country of hundreds of millions of people every single day. But efficiency can also create distance. And when people feel disconnected from how their food is produced, even small changes in how food looks or behaves can begin to raise much bigger questions. Many of the videos circulating online today present the issue in extreme terms. Some claim the entire food supply has become artificial. Others suggest modern agriculture has quietly turned everyday meals into something completely different from what people once ate. Reality is usually less dramatic, but the questions people are asking are not unreasonable. Some of the observations that appear online do have real explanations. Changes in breeding can affect the texture of meat. Modern preservatives can extend the life of packaged bread. Large-scale farming can involve chemicals that regulators monitor carefully. Most of these changes exist because the American food system was built to produce enormous quantities of affordable food for a very large population. At the same time, much of what people eat today exists somewhere within the world of ultra-processed food where manufacturing, preservation, and distribution all shape the final product. And as more people begin to notice these differences, one question keeps returning. How well do we actually understand the system that produces the food on our table?